enhanced entity relationship. Okay, we looked at generalization, which we said it is the reverse of the specialization process. Okay, and we looked at the generalization. We said you start by having some classes on their own, or some entity on their own, and you see that those entities have something in common, and you create that parent, okay, that does have in common something with, for instance, those entities or separated entity, like for instance car and truck. Both they can be categorized as a vehicle, so we just create that generalization of the car and the truck. Okay, and those entities, there were the separate entity. Now there are subclasses of the superclass vehicle. We looked at the specialization. We talk about how we can create specialization based on the predicate and the attribute, the value of the attribute. We looked at the disjointness and completeness. We refer to the D in the circle and to the O in the circle. We spoke also about the partial and total relationship. Okay, when we do have a single line and double line for the total and partial, we specify that one. Just jump us. Okay, we did this one. Okay, now another concept that can be found in, let's say, in an EER diagram. You might find in some examples, the subclass itself is divided into other subclasses. Okay, let's pick up an example. Okay, what do you think here? What do you see?
Class. We have employee, class employee.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Class engineer and class manager have other class.
Yes, you do have here engineer. Okay, if you can see here the engineer. Okay, if you pick up the engineer itself, the engineer is a subclass of what? Of the employee. Engineer is a subclass of the employee. And further, that engineer subclass has other subclass, which is engineering manager. So now the engineer is considered now as a superclass for this specialization, engineering manager, and it is a subclass in the specialization for the employee or superclass employee. That means in some cases you will have some subclasses that are also divided into divided into other subclasses. So they are in one part they are subclass of a superclass, and in another specialization they are superclass for other subclasses. Okay, and this is a normal thing when you go, for instance, when we talk for instance for an engineering manager. An engineering manager, okay, normally to be an engineer manager you should be an engineer. Okay, you cannot be an engineer manager if you are a technician or a secretary or any other type of job you are working on that specific company, for instance. So to be an engineering manager you need to be first an engineer, then you will be an engineering manager. That's why we say here, if you can see here, we do have subclass and another subclass. This is now superclass of this one. Okay, and an engineer manager is an element of an engineer. He has to be an engineer first in order to be engineering among engineering manager subclass. Clear for this one, Shabab?
Doctor.
Naam.
How three classes are in one class? Are class for subclass?
Say it again.
How engineer and manager and salaried employee are super classes for one subclass?
How engineer and what? And manager
and salaried employee.
Engineer, manager. This we specify that one. We said this one This is one specialization, secretary, technician, engineer.
No, doctor. Sorry,
No.
maybe I didn't say my question good.
No.
Engineer and manager and
Engineer, yes, he is an engineer. This engineering manager will contains he is an engineer and he is a manager.
And he also
and he is also salaried employee.
Okay.
Okay. As we mentioned, you to be an engineer manager, you need to be an engineer, and you are also a manager. So we combine those two titles. You are an engineer manager. So anyone who is element of this engineering manager, he is an engineer and he is a manager as well, and he is a salaried employee.
And engineering manager can have another attribute, more attribute.
And as we mentioned here, if you remember here, this is partial or total?
Here?
Partial.
Partial.
So what was the question? No.
But does this imply that the manager, the engineer, the technician, and the secretary are not salaried employees?
No, they should be salaried, because if you see here, they are all employees.
Yeah.
And in the employee, we do have here a total participation. That means whatever you are an employee, بغض النظر if you are secretary or a technician or engineer, manager, whatever, as long as you are an employee, because of that total participation, you should be either hourly employee or a salaried employee.
Yes, but the question is, why is a salaried employee a parent of engineering manager, but it is not a parent of manager, engineer, technician, and secretary?
Say it again. Why salaried?
Why a salaried employee is a parent of engineering manager, but it is not a parent of manager, engineer, technician, and secretary?
No, this is just an example, Shabab. This is just an example.
No,
just an example to show you that this one, okay, an engineering manager is a salaried employee, because it is a new subclass. Okay, it doesn't have a direct connection with the employee.
No, also
okay, because if we did have a direct connection with the employee, it won't be a subclass of the engineer. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, what was the other question?
No, I was saying some other employees are paid differently.
Yes.
All of them are salaried.
Yes. Now, this is what we call specialization hierarchy. Specialization hierarchy, which you do have. This is another constraint that you do have every subclass. Okay, participate as a subclass in only one subclass relationship. That means you will have only one parent. Okay, you cannot have two parents. For instance, we talk about here what is known as we do have a lattice or a hierarchy. We're going to see later that when we do have, for instance, an hierarchy, when we say we do have a relationship subclass and superclass hierarchy, that means you will find a subclass can be only or can be part only of one parent. It does have only one parent. Here, for instance, this is we talk about lattice. What it is called the lattice, because if you can see here, the engineering manager, how many superclass the engineering manager has? How many superclass?
Three.
The engineering manager has engineer superclass, has the manager as superclass, has the salaried as a superclass, salaried employee as superclass. This type of specialization, it is called specialization lattice. إيش معنى lattice؟ البنية. Okay, that means this type of specialization, if you see specialization lattice, that means a subclass might have more than one superclass, or might belongs to more than a superclass, or might have more than one parent. Like this, engineering manager has three parents: engineer, manager, and salaried employee. This type of specialization is called specialization lattice. If in your diagram all the subclasses have only one parent, will have only one superclass, will participate in only one superclass subclass relationship, at that moment we'll say that we do have a hierarchy specialization. Okay, so I will repeat. For lattice specialization like this one, it allows us to have one subclass or more that has more than one parent, that is related to more than one superclass, like engineer manager. If, for instance, if we remove this line and we remove this line, and we will have only engineer is the parent of engineering manager only, this diagram will become a hierarchy specialization. Hierarchy specialization معناه you will have, okay, let me just it's like, for instance, for in the hierarchy specialization, you will have, let's say, a parent like this. You have like a tree. Okay. Okay. We'll have here another one, for instance. Okay. Let's just pick up this simple example. Okay. And I will have, for instance, in this manner, I might have this type of diagram. Okay, whatever. Okay, if you can see here, the type of this diagram, it is structure, it is hierarchy structure. That means you will have a node or a root, a parent has other child, and the child has only, let's say, some parent. That means each child or each subclass has only one parent. This subclass, the parent of this subclass is this one. The parent of this subclass is this one. We cannot have two subclasses. If we did have, okay, if I did have, for instance, like that, like this one, okay, normally if this one, it will be direct. So just for the sake of explanation, it should be, it's like circle. We are supposing that there are others, but here we might have a direct one. Okay, if I will have a direct one, okay, let's let me erase this one. Okay, and we will have a direct one. If we did have in this diagram, for instance, I will have this line and I will have this line. This type of specialization, it is not hierarchy specialization. Why? Can you tell why, Shabab? Why it is not called hierarchy specialization?
Because, doctor, there is more than one parent.
Because this subclass has this one as a parent, and it does have this one as a parent. Okay, but if I will remove, okay, if I remove this line, in this case, what I will have, okay, in my case here, all the subclasses, all the specialization have only one parent. This specialization, okay, this specialization has only one parent, which is this one. This specialization has only one parent, which is this one. This specialization has only one parent, which is this one. So this one is called specialization hierarchy. Okay, whenever you see, let's say, a specialization that does have more than one parent, it is called a lattice. If it has only one parent, every specialization in your diagram, we're talking about every specialization, has only one superclass, or has only one parent, we call that as a hierarchy specialization. Okay, Shabab? Now,
sorry, doctor, I have a question not related for this. Can I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
In the diagram, AR,
yes.
Could you move the slide above? No, same here. Yes. If we want to make totally between, for example, employee and manager, or manager and engineering manager. If we
employee, manager, and
yes, make the relation between them total. How can we represent? I know it's logically correct, but how can we represent if there is one class?
Just you put double line.
Double line for all the.
Double line. The line that will connect employee to manager, just make it double line.
Okay.
Okay, to say that's like the way we did here. The only difference is we do have the circle. And now we don't have the circle.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Now, in terms of inheritance, okay, when we said an inheritance, we said that a subclass inherits attributes not only of its direct superclass but also for all its predecessor superclasses. Which معنى? Here the engineering manager will inherit all the attributes and relationship of engineer plus those of employee, because we do have hierarchy. Okay, it's like we say أب عن جد. Okay, you inherit يرث أب عن جد. This is the أب and this is the جد. Okay, you inherit everything from engineer and you inherit everything from the employee. Why? Automatically, logically, because engineer is inheriting everything from employee, and you are inheriting everything from engineer, automatically you are inheriting everything from employee. That's how we said it will inherit everything. When you talk everything, attributes and relationship, not only for the direct superclass, which is, for instance, in our example here, engineer, but it will inherit also its predecessor superclasses اللي قبلها كلهم. If you do have 1000 or 100 superclass above that are linked, that form a hierarchy to you, ولا they do have a line descendant, you are descendant, you will inherit from your ancestors. Okay, this is what is known as multiple inheritance. A subclass with more than one superclass is called a shared subclass. Multiple inheritance. Here, for instance, you have engineer as a superclass, you have a manager as superclass, you have a salaried as employee as a superclass. You will inherit from engineer, you will inherit from manager, and you will inherit everything from salaried employee. This one is called multiple inheritance because it is a shared subclass. This subclass, engineering manager, is shared between engineer, manager, and salaried employee. That's why we talk about multiple inheritance. You are inheriting from multiple superclasses. Okay, Shabab?
So what will be the difference between multiple and latency?
نعم.
What we said, if we have more than one parent, that's mean latency.
لا شوف, inheritance is one thing. Inheritance is not the characteristic. Okay, you are inheriting. When we talk about specialization lattice, well, specialization hierarchy is the diagram itself.
And each vocab is
for lattice, that means you will have some subclasses that have more than one parent. If they have more than one parent, that means you will have multiple inheritance.
Okay. They are related, not conduct.
Yes, they are related. Yes, they are related.
If we have one latency, that means the whole specialization is latency, right?
The whole diagram, the whole specialization is called specialization lattice.
Okay.
Because you have more than one parent. You have that subclass has more than one parent. Is related to more than one parent.
Clear.
Okay. Specialization start with an entity type, then define subclasses. This is the way how we defined it. Top-down conceptual. Okay. Let's now look at, this is an example. Okay. A bigger example where you see specialization, generalization, lattice in university database. Okay. Now, how we can interpret, or what are, let's say, the definition of this requirement that leads us to design this type of diagram. Okay. Here we said that you do have, say, a database, a university database. Okay, where you do have three types. You do have a person, and you do have three types of person. We do have a student, we do have alumni, and we do have an employee. Okay, this is what we got, a person. And what else? What can you say else? And every employee, okay, and every employee has a salary. This is a specific attribute for the employee. Okay, salary. We said that at the beginning. We have already covered that. We do have employee, which is subclass of a person. Employee will inherit all the attributes of person plus it does have its own attribute, which is salary. Like the student it is a person with birth date, address, sex, name, SSN as a person, plus it does have its own attribute, which is a major department, okay, which does that student belongs. And we said that a person can belong. What can we say about this O? Overlapping. We say, what we can say, Shabab?
Can be doctor, students, employee, and at the same time. And at the same time can be all individuals.
Say it again.
Students can be employee at the same time.
Yes, a person can be employee, and he can be an alumnus, he can be a student. Okay? That's because of that overlapping. We said overlapping, that means a person or an entity person might be one of these or all of these. Okay? He can be employee or and alumnus without being student, or alumnus and student without being employee, or the three of them. Okay? Here we say, because we are talking about, let's say, that overlapping relation. Okay? And every employee, as we mentioned, has a salary, and there are three types of employee. If you can see here, for the employee itself, we do have three types of employees. We do have staff, we do have faculty, and we do have student assistant. Okay? An employee, what about this D now? If we look at this part, what we can say?
Can be
only be one of them.
or faculty or student assistants. Not all.
Because it is disjoint. Disjoint, that means an employee can be either staff or faculty or a student assistant. Not like a person. Person can be employee and alumnus and student. However, here he can be an employee, can be a staff or a faculty or a student assistant. Okay, so this is for the alumni. And if you look at, for instance, for the staff, let's go back here. For the alumnus, it does have its own attributes, like we did with the student. For the staff, it does have its own attribute, which is position. Faculty has its own attribute on top of the employee's attribute and person. Okay, it does have a rank. And what we can say else? Each faculty has a rank, as we mentioned, and each staff has its position. Okay, then what else we can say? If you go to, let's now to research assistant. If you go to the student, okay,
Yeah,
a student assistant can be also classified as a research assistant and teaching assistant. Okay, and they do have their own attribute. Okay, you do have here, for instance, for the student assistant, percent type, okay, that they work in the database, and the research assistant, it does have their own research project that is stored in the database, and the teaching assistant also is linked to the course they work on. Okay, because it is student assistant, and student assistant can be a research or a teaching assistant, and you do have here a D. And we go also to the student. Student is further divided into graduate student and undergraduate student. That means a student can be both or one of them.
One of them.
One of them. We do have D here, disjoint. That means a student can be either graduate student or an undergraduate student, with some specific attribute for both. Okay, for instance, for graduate student, you do have the degree program. If he is undergraduate student, he does have a class. Okay, freshman or sophomore or whatever, first year, whatever the class this undergraduate is. Okay, so these are, when we talk about, let's say, a big picture of specialization, you do have here. Now, what else we can say?
That student assistant is a specialization, lattice.
This is what I want to ask. Yes. Now, this diagram, Shabab, do we consider this diagram as hierarchy specialization does have specialization lattice.
It's
Lattice.
lattice
Why
because
lattice?
student
Why lattice?
assistant
Student
has two parents.
Has two classes.
Because of that student assistant. If you can see, student assistant has two parents, is linked to two class, super class. He is linked to the employee and he is linked to a student. If we remove that part, if we remove this student assistant, we will have as a result hierarchy or lattice?
Hierarchy.
Hierarchy. If we remove this student assistant, or if we remove one of the link of the student assistant, okay, for instance, if we remove this line, we will have every specialization has only one parent, will have one superclass. Staff, faculty, student will have only employee, parent, and graduate, so undergraduate will have only one parent. Okay, Shabab? So,
Doctor,
now,
student assistant, does it have to be both a student and an employee?
now,
The student assistant,
yes.
does it have to be both student and an employee?
Yes, he is, yes. Yes, you do have here student assistant is an employee and he's a student.
Doctor, I do have a
Yes.
question regarding the full participation in the diagram. How can I translate that from English? Like the student is fully participated, or the employee?
A student must be graduate or undergraduate. Okay?
Okay.
And the same thing here. An employee must be staff or faculty or student assistant. And if you do have a student assistant, this student assistant should be either a research assistant or a teaching assistant. We cannot have someone who has been classified as a student assistant and is not researcher or teaching.
So all student assistants should be either both.
Yes, if you see double, every element in this entity, in this set, should be in one of those. If you don't have here D, that means he should be either in research assistant or he should be a teaching assistant. We cannot have an element inside the student assistant set. That's all, and he doesn't belong to IMA research assistant or teaching assistant. Now the same thing here. When I do have a student, any student should be either in the graduate, should be a graduate student or an undergraduate student. We cannot have student on its own. Even in the logic, doesn't exist. University will say this is a student of PSU, and he is not a graduate and he is not an undergraduate student. What he can be? Okay, see, logically. So that's why we do have, and we should have here something that every student in a university is enrolled in the graduate study, or he is an undergraduate student. And the same thing when we say employee, every employee is, whether it is his staff, faculty, or student assistant. He might be, you can have a student who is studying at the same time and working at the same time within the same university. Okay, and he is considered a student assistant. When we do have a person within university, okay, he can be employee or alumnus or student, and so on. Okay, Shabab?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, another concept, Shabab.
Doctor,
Yes.
so before we move on to the other concept, so why would we sometimes need to use a hierarchical structure for the
It is based on the requirement, Shabab. The ER or EER is always based on the requirement.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, what's the advantage of the hierarchical over the lattice? And
Also, the same answer. It is based on the requirement. It is based on the requirement. If the requirement says we have a student assistant, this is based on the requirement. We said that student assistant because, for instance, how can you say I do have an employee, and among employees we can hire student, okay, or a previous student, alumnus student, and they are working. For instance, you are graduate. You have just been you finished your undergraduate study, okay, and you have been hired by university to work as a part-time, and at the same time you are studying for a master degree. This is based on the requirement, based on the situation and the environment you are taking the requirement from.
So in that case, it has to be a lattice, right?
Yes, if the diagram will have one subclass or one specialization has more than one superclass, we call it lattice.
Yeah.
Okay, it is, everything is pending, or it depends on the requirement. Okay, we cannot say this is better than this one. In every situation, in every environment, they do have their own requirement, and based on the requirement, you will design this ER or EER diagram.
What about the hierarchical? Why would a stakeholder need a hierarchical structure?
Because the requirement, they don't want to have someone who belongs to more than one group. This is what is the hierarchy. That means you will find a specialization that is only related to only one parent. You will have only one parent-child relationship. We cannot have child who has more than one parent relationship. We'll have one superclass relationship.
So it's based on business logic.
It is, yes. Okay. Another type of thing that we can find in relation or in ER, we do have what is known as categories or union. Okay, categories or union. Here we do have superclass subclass relationship. If you remember, when we talk about superclass subclass, we do have a single superclass. Now, what if we have, and we talk about the shared subclass? If you have a shared subclass, we do have, that means more than one superclass subclass relationship. We have each relationship has a single superclass, and let's show you an example. Okay, let's say this is an example. Okay, this is our scenario where we do have, okay, when you talk about a car, for instance, the owner of a car. Okay, in this situation, what we have, an owner of a car can be a person. A person can own the car, a bank can own the car, and the company can own the car. We talk about the owner of the car. When you see a car, for instance, you might have, for instance, more than one, let's say, entity that own the car. Okay, here we do have three entities. We do have a person, we do have a bank, and a company. Now, in our database, for instance, this is a database for motor vehicle. Okay, they register, they do have as a requirement, an owner of a vehicle can be a person, he can be a bank. Okay, the bank who, let's say, who owns the car, or he can be a company. So what we need to do, we need to create a class, okay, or entities, some elements where we need to include all those three types: person, bank, and company, to play the role of the owner. When you say the owner, that means someone who owns the car. Okay, we need to create a class, another class, which we call it, let's say, which is a subclass. Okay, and we say that this owner subclass that has been created, it is called a category or union. Why it is category or union? Because it is the union owner. What we do find inside this entity owner, we find the union. That's why you see here the U symbol for union. Okay, between person, okay, and you do have a bank and the company. Okay, and as we mentioned here, we are specifying. Now, when we say union, Shabab, what comes to your mind? Union of three sets.
The common values between the three sets.
Common? Are you sure common? It is not a common, Shabab. Common, when you talk common, it is intersection. We talk about union.
All of them.
Join the company to the people working in it, and the third party to view it.
Yes, you will have in the owner, you will find, can a car belongs to person and the bank and the company at the same time?
Yes.
Kif yes, Shabab?
Can what?
Actually, no.
Can a car, when you have a car, when you buy a car, that
Yes.
car, it is either it belongs to you, you are the owner, which is the person, or the bank who owns the car and he just rented the, you are paying, for instance, like when you pay by installment to buy a car, the car will still in the possession, will still the bank, still the owner of the car until you pay all the installments. صح ولا لا?
Yes.
That means
That's true.
the car cannot be your own car, and it is at the same time it belongs to the bank, and it belongs to the company. When the owner of car is either a person or a bank or a company. And this is the definition of union. When you do have union of the sets A, B, C, the element or the result of the union by definition in math, you do have the union will contain element of A or B or C. Okay?
Doctor,
نعم.
what will be the difference if we make D?
We're not talking about D, Shabab. We're talking about union. This is a special example.
I mean, Doctor,
It is
if we
different.
make D,
If you put D, if you go back to our previous examples, what we have seen, okay, what can you say here? Can we say an employee? Let's pick up this example. An employee is a staff
or
and or.
it cannot be at the same time. It cannot be at the same time staff and faculty.
Yes, it cannot be at the same time. Let's go to the O. Where is our O? Overlapping. What about this one?
Here we said and.
We say
Yeah,
and.
can be or and. It's both.
Say it again.
Here there is
can be-
overlapping. Main factoring part
overlapping,
can be
yeah.
processed part.
Yes. Just have a look at the difference. شوف يا شباب how this one is designed. Okay? This is specialization. This is specialization. If you can see, you see here, just see the symbol and how it goes. It goes from this one to the other one. The same thing. We do have specialization. This is specialization. We do have, and when you talk about specialization, we are talking about the intersection. Okay? When you do have specialization, we are talking about an employee. Okay? We'll have, let's say, will be, or for instance, let's go to this. Yes, here you do have the intersection of the employee. For instance, it will hold the secretary. بغض النظر على دي شباب. Let's look at the specialization. Now the difference between specialization and category. Specialization, we're talking about intersection. Intersection, that means the attribute of that element that belongs to the entity, he belongs to the intersection of the three, for instance. However, when you talk about the union, okay, when you talk about the union, in the union, you will have one of them, the owner, okay, and you can see here the difference between this type of diagram, okay, we are not starting from superclass, and we're not starting from superclass and we go and create subgroups, which is the different types of which is specialization. Now we do have the inverse. We do have entities, separate entities, person, bank, company, and from those three entities, we are creating the owner. Now this owner is the subclass. The owner is the subclass. And the superclass is a person, bank, and company. It is the inverse. We are not talking about the owner is a subclass. It is not a superclass in the union category. This is the difference, Shabab. Okay, it's not like the previous one. For the specialization, employee is the superclass, and the other ones are a subclass. Now we do have the inverse. The owner is the union of person, bank, and company. That means in the owner, any element inside the owner is either a person or a bank or a company. But you can find inside it, I will find the car that belongs to the person, another car that belongs to the bank, and another car that belongs to the company. And all those cars are inside this element or inside this set, which is the owner. But we cannot find inside that owner a car that belongs to a person and the bank and the company.
Okay.
This is the difference with the union.
Inverse. Super class is bank or person or company.
Barakallahu fik. And here union, the owner, what we will find inside the owner, okay? For instance, what we will find, let's say this is the owner. Oh, sorry. Let's say this is the owner set. Okay? And what we can find? We can find inside it, let's say I do have 3 types of cars. Okay, I do have 3 types of cars. For instance, this car belongs to the bank. Okay, and this car belongs to a person. And this car belongs to whom?
Company.
Company. This is what I mean by the owner of the car. It is a bank, but they are all inside the same set. The owner. Okay,
Yes.
the owner. They are all the same. What we are saying that we cannot have, for instance, a car, okay, that belongs to the bank, for instance, and for instance, a person. This is not acceptable because we are talking about union. This we cannot have such entity inside the owner because we are talking about the union. Union means imma bank or person or the company who owns the car. We cannot have a car inside the owner set that is owned by a bank and the person and the company, or a company and person, whatever the combination. It should be only one of them. This is what we say. This is the union. It should be only one of them.
Doctor?
Now,
Doctor, why is the bank fully participated?
now,
Why is the bank fully participated?
why is not the bank? We are not talking about the bank. We are talking about the union.
Okay.
We're talking about the union. How do we call it? The union relationship.
So, but only the bank has 2 lines. For
Yes.
Participation.
This is based on the requirement. This is based on the requirement, and we don't have here the whole requirement. What is required?
Okay.
Okay. You might have as a requirement all the cars should go through the bank, for instance. Okay. For instance, when you buy a car, whether you are a person or a company, you have to go through the bank to buy, for instance, a car.
Oh, this is the translation. Could be.
Yes, but we don't have here, let's say, the full requirement for this type of for the ER diagram.
Clear.
Okay, Shabab. So this is what we specified as. We said that when you do have a car, for instance, and here we said each owner, if you do have each owner, will inherit the attribute of a company, or a bank, or a person. If I am, for instance, the owner of the car is the person, you will have all those entities, all those attributes that belongs to the person. If the owner is the company, will inherit all those attributes of the company, and vice versa for the bank. Okay. It depends of the superclass to which that owner belongs to. Okay, Shabab?